Don't forget, ko-fi.com/stopwritingalone is a real simple way to show your support for what's going on here week after week. Hi, everyone. This is Nicole Rivera, and you're listening to the Stop Writing Alone podcast for writers who are looking for their writing community. I know you want to find readers for your work, but I think your first step is to connect with other writers. That's what we're going to do here in the Stop Writing Alone podcast. We'll do writing prompts and other writing group activities, discover online writing communities, learn how to find local writing groups, or how to make your own. Join us as we explore, learn, and write. Hi, this is Nicole Rivera, and you're listening to the Stop Writing Alone podcast. All during February, as it was Black History Month, aside from the two books that I was sort of scheduled to read during the month because of book clubs, I have made it a point to read just Black authors. So it began with a book that I was actually still reading from the month before, and that is Reckless by Selena Montgomery. It was followed up by Black Buck, written by Matteo Ascariapour. And then I finally got back into a book that I started like 3 different times, but now I'm like loving. You know, when you start a book and you're like, you don't get hooked. And usually it's just like life is distracting. It's not giving you the time to sit with it. I think that's what was happening. Every time I sat down, I was reading like a page, 2 pages, and something would happen, because once I got in, I was like, I'm in. And that's the Children of Blood and Bone by Tomi Adeyemi. And then I got 2 books in the mail just this week that I cannot wait to read. And one is The Invisible Queen, Mixed Ancestry Revealed by Stephanie E. Myers. And I cannot wait to read The Body Is Not an Apology, The Power of Radical Self-Love by Sonia Renee Taylor. And if you're not following Sonia on Instagram, get on that. I love this woman. So I was really happy that this is the 2nd edition of her book. So, and it just, I pre-ordered it and it came. So that was exciting. And here's why I'm telling you this. Number one, I am not a person of color. And when I write, I am writing from my own experience. And my experience growing up in Staten Island, New York, and going to the private schools that I went to was very limited in its exposure to multiple cultures. Now that changed, when I got into adulthood a little bit in college, but more so obviously when I became a public school teacher in New York City public schools. But I still always feel like I'm making up for lost time for all of the stories that I wasn't told. And that goes way beyond just Black history. It goes through so much of history, because I feel like I was taught such a limited amount of history. And I don't know if it was just my schools or if that's history across the board. But the thing is, I hated history when I was a kid. Absolutely hated it. And when I became a teacher of a subject that many people hate, that is mathematics, by the way, I really felt bad for all the years that I had said history's the worst. I hate history. And I had this like really cool opportunity and coincidence, I guess. I don't even know like how this happened, but in the school that I taught, the math department and the history department were on the same floor. So when I landed in a teacher's lounge, I ended up getting like mixed in with a bunch of history teachers. And of course, I'm friends with like so many history teachers. And when I got to the conversation, I finally was just like, I feel really bad, but I always hated history. How did this happen? Like, what do you love about this, that this is your career? And it would never fail that, like, I think I'm trying to think of everybody. Yeah, I think almost everybody came to me with a very similar answer. And they said, but it's nothing but story, right? It's all these great stories. And I'm like, what great stories? Because the history I was taught was so bland, lacking really like any kind of energy. It was like facts and things. And I was going to say I should have known. I was a kid. I definitely should not have known. I was, being led astray. But looking back and thinking about how bland the history was that I was taught, it makes no sense whatsoever. It makes no sense. Like a critical mind can look at that and say, that can't be true. But it's also like, I also can give myself a pass on not enjoying the subject, because when I first started writing, I think many people fall into this sort of situation where you write what we in the, when we're writing female protagonists realm call the Mary Sue, like this wonderful character, and there's nothing wrong with her, she's like flawless, and that essentially was like the United States was my Mary Sue. And that's, as a writer, we know that's not a great character. Nobody wants to hear that story. Boring, right? So I can give myself a pass on being bored. I am disappointed that I wasn't more curious to ask, but like I said, I was a kid. So to make up for lost time in trying to learn as much history as I can, because I do believe it is my responsibility as a writer. And that's pretty much what I want to share with you guys today. What are our responsibilities as writers when it comes to really understanding the world around us? Now, there's history, and then there's your story. And your story may not deal with all of the different aspects of history or society. You might be on a real escapist route here. But if you are coming to writing with a very limited world view, I think you have to really be careful about where you may unintentionally misrepresent. Now, back in June, I did an episode called The Danger of the Singular Story, based on a TED Talk that I absolutely adore. I'll put the link in the show notes again. And it's really the thing that I always worry about. I worry about the danger of the singular story, and I worry about the limitations of my own worldview coming through in my writing. And so I try to read widely. I try to educate myself. And just like one example is this book that I have, The Invisible Queen. This was just like a massive eye-opening thing for me just in recent weeks, because my husband and I are ridiculous. We're always TV lovers. We just love TV, right? I'm not going to apologize for that. That's one of the places I get like all my story juices, is watching television. But I mean, quarantine life has really really jacked up our addictions. So we are binge watching things like crazy. And just recently we finally caught up and saw Bridgerton, which, has been widely talked about. So I'm sure this is not the first time you're hearing about Bridgerton. It's a show on Netflix. It is produced by Shondaland. That's Shonda Rhimes, who, you may know from, I was a huge fan of Scandal and How to Get Away with Murder. I know many people love Grey's Anatomy. She's just, wonderful. And so there's just Shonda-ness sprinkled all over Bridgerton. Bridgerton is also based on, a series of books, which I have not read, but I think I might, even though I'm not typically into the whole romance thing. But anyway, the really intriguing thing when you put on Bridgerton is that it's set in England at the time of King George. So we're talking about like around colonial times, right? And it's all about the nobles and, it's romance. So it's like people trying to find their mate for life and find love and what's more important. Society. All right, I won't tell you the whole story, whatever. But immediately when you put on the show, you can't help but be struck by the diversity of the cast. And this is not like just saying that, they good for them, they got brown faces on the screen. They have Black people in noble people, right? And you're like, wait a minute, that's awesome. Is that artistic choice, or was that what was really happening? And then you get a couple of scenes in, and all of a sudden you meet the Queen, King George's wife, and she's cast as a Black woman, and you're like, huh. And my husband and I turned to each other and we're like, wait, what is this? Is this artistic choice, or was there a Black Queen? Did we miss that? And really, like, both of us were thinking, no, there was no Black Queen. I love that they did that. That's pretty cool. But after we watched the whole show, my husband went onto YouTube and, like, searched it, and we found out there was, in fact, a mixed race queen in Queen Sophia Charlotte, King George's wife. And this is at the time that people decided to, like, leave England to come to the United States. So what's that about? Right? I have so many questions. I have not started this book, The Invisible Queen. But it just feels like yet another story I wasn't told, right? And that's, that was fairly recently, like, confirmed. So I can give my teachers a pass on that. They might not have really known that. But it just speaks to the stuff that runs rampant throughout our own education, our own exposure. I mean, I remember when I first read Whereas, the poetry book, and now I can't remember the author's name, it's somewhere tucked away on a bookshelf. I'll put a link in the bio so that you can, a link, what am I on Instagram? I'll put a link in the show notes for the Whereas book. But in there is a poem that is all about the day that Abraham Lincoln signed the Emancipation Proclamation and what atrocities were happening to an Indian tribe at, like, the same time under his orders. And so it's like this man that we celebrate for signing the Emancipation Proclamation, and we say, oh, wow, he really got it. He got, this whole, like, human thing. And yet, I mean, like, murder. Okay, so I feel like I'm off on like 15 different tangents of history lessons here, but my point is, I believe that if you are going to be a writer, it is part of your responsibility to read widely, to try to fill in the blanks for what your life experience and education may have left out. And some of that is not your fault, but some of it we have to take responsibility for. And to that end, one of the ways that I have been consciously trying to take responsibility for this is not just in the books that I'm choosing to read for my own pleasure, but I really was sort of struck, I want to say it was in the fall when I was reading oh my goodness, is it Story Genius by Lisa Cron? And I said, what is going on that every single time I'm reading a book about the process of writing, I'm reading something by a white lady and a couple of times by a white guy. But, like, where's everybody else's conversation in writing? Because I know there's writers of color and all different, races and ethnic backgrounds. And I'm just like, I keep stumbling across the same thing over and over again. And I have to wonder, what am I missing? Honestly, like, what am I missing? I want to know everyone's advice from all different perspectives. So I think it was in January that I finally was like, I'm going to ask this question like out loud to other people and say, do you know of any books on writing by a person of color? Do you know of, any other resources where, or, of a person of color, a writer of color who is teaching a course on writing, like what's going on? And what was so funny is like the moment that I asked the question out loud, I also, I was like in between on my binge watches, and I said, "Oh, let me do in between this show that I just finished and the next one I start. Let me do a master class because I have that pass." And I open it up and it's like, "Oh, you have a new instructor, Walter Mosley, on writing." I'm like, "A new writing instructor? This is amazing." And I put it on. It's Walter freaking Mosley, and this is an excellent resource that I'm talking about. So we have a man, a gentleman of color who's written a bunch of books and now is teaching a masterclass, and he also has some books on writing. So I'm going to put the links in the show notes for Walter's books, because the only other book that I had previous to Walter's books, and I haven't read his books yet, but I did go watch his masterclass, and I loved it because he is he's singing a lot of my songs. Like I like the way he seems to be a champion for the pantsing process, but he talks so much about writing, about the Black experience. So I think that's also been a thing that sort of planted seeds for me back in January too, about the, finding this representation, writing about this character, and making sure that he brought a fullness to that story with, every single book that he wrote. And I mean, it was like exactly the thing that I was like looking for. And I plan to watch that one again. But as I said, the only other book that I had read and owned by a writer of color was I think it's called Right Now Here's How by Walter Dean Myers. So it's Walter Dean Myers. I mean, we're fans in the house because, my husband has taught a bunch of his stuff. And, but the book is written for kids, So I know that I love books that are written towards a younger audience, because I feel like when people have to write something for a younger audience, they have to be like really specific and not mess around. So I feel like people get to the point better when they're writing for kids sometimes. So I know I love that stuff, but I don't know that everybody would like a recommendation of a book that was written for a younger audience. So I was like, I need more. So we have Walter Mosley, we have Walter D. Myers, Robert Fleming, which interesting guy because like he wrote some erotica in his day. So depending on what you're interested in. But he did actually even write a book on the African American writing experience. So that's pretty cool. Again, I'll put the link in the show notes. And Angela Benson is another author that wrote to that topic. So, I mean, I feel it is my responsibility to bring more of those resources to the forefront for everybody's benefit, whether you're a writer of color or not. Like, why aren't we hearing various perspectives on how to get this job done? I heard so many things in Walter Mosley's masterclass that I was like, yes, this is like giving me a whole new way to sort of process what I've been doing all along. So I love that. I also shared on the Envy Rivera YouTube channel one of my favorite guys in YA, which I feel like I speak about him at like every third episode, Jason Reynolds, who I am really hoping one day does write a book on writing, but I sense that he may also write it for a younger audience. But he did this fantastic series back in the spring when lockdown really happened, spring of 2020, where he was showing up on, I really think he was showing up on Instagram. I know I saw him on Instagram doing this, but it's all on YouTube now. He did this series for the Library of Congress because he's the Young Readers Ambassador right now. And it's called Write, Write, Write. So it's write as, how we write, WRITE, and then write, RIGHT. And he said that's not that there's a right way and a wrong way to write. He said it's what's right for you. And the last right is RITE. And that's because the writing is a ritual. The thing that he was bringing to us was a ritual. So write, write, write. And he was doing it, I believe, weekly. I watched most of them when they came out live, but I shared one in the Friday Night Writes on the MV Rivera YouTube just to make sure that everybody knew it was out there, because there's like 20-something videos of all these cool different writing exercises. Some of them are like, go write this thing. Some of them are just really just thinking differently and helping you break through some sort of creativity blocks. But I loved all of his stuff all the time. And like I said, I'm still waiting. I'm hoping he's going to write us a book on his process and everything. But until then, we have that series to look to. But I will keep my ear to the ground and my eyes open, because this is a really weird question to ask people, because it's not like every single writing book says, I'm a book on writing and I'm a person of color, or I'm a book on writing and I'm a white lady who wrote this book. Like, nobody really cares about that. And I can understand that on the one hand, we can say like, oh, it doesn't really matter. We're all talking about writing. But I do think it always matters in a certain sense. So, yeah. So that's what I've got so far. It's not a very extensive list, because I got all drowned in my fiction reading. Oh, but I did want to point out to you guys that the first book that I mentioned, Reckless by Selena Montgomery, in case anybody did not know, Selena Montgomery is actually Stacey Abrams. Stacey Abrams from Georgia, the political monster that is just a wonderful woman that is a powerhouse not to be messed with. Before she got into politics, she wrote romance. And Reckless is, I did not realize, the first in a series. I think it's a trilogy. So as I was getting near to the end, I'm like, wait a second, what's going on? So I might be hooked again, even though I don't really read romance. I guess I should just let that go. It seems as though I read romance now, and I may be looking for the next book. But I highly recommend, if I didn't already mention it, that the Black Buck book. Loved that. I actually recommended it to my local book club, so that's going to be our book that we're going to discuss next month. And as I said, go check out Sonia Renee Taylor, and once you hang out on her Instagram for a while, you will go running to buy her book, The Body Is Not an Apology. That she sells herself on that one. And I'm sure most people have already read The Children of Blood and Bone, and I'm just super late to that because we're already into that series. So there's plenty of stuff way beyond that, but that's just like some of the stuff that I'm reading right now. And I wanted to just have the conversation of thinking about that. That to me is the power in something like Black History Month and what we are, about to experience now in March in Women's History Month. It's just that reminder of all of these places and things that we perhaps weren't taught about, we didn't know about, and just, sort of asking yourself, like, am I still, paying attention to that, or is that one of those things I let go? It's kind of like when somebody says, like, you got to drink 8 glasses of water a day, and you're like, oh, yeah, I do know that. Obviously, I know that. But did I? Maybe that's why I'm so thirsty. And for us in this conversation, maybe that's why I'm feeling I'm lacking in my love of history. And that's where my story maybe is falling flat. These are the things that might be missing to give it that verisimilitude. I always like that word, but I always struggle to say it. Anyway, thank you as always for listening. If you have any other recommendations for books or writing teachers that I should seek out of, and any way to sort of diversify my input of education, I would love to hear from you. Please feel free to either DM me on the Instagram at Stop Writing Alone, or drop me a message on Facebook Messenger, or whatever way. I mean, just throw it up in the Stop Writing Alone Facebook group. It's a conversation for all of us to have. So I think if you've got a resource for us, we would love to have it. And also, I'll always take some good book recommendations, no matter who wrote it. So, yeah. That is it for this week. If you haven't been participating and you are listening to this episode when it goes live, there are 2 days left in the Happy Campers Light. That's this Thursday and Friday. And then we are going to start the spring session of Happy Campers on March 1st. And if you want to hear more about what the plan is and what Happy Campers is, just listen to the previous episode 109, titled Happy Campers is Back. And that is it, really. That's where you can find all that information, including links. But, I'll put links in the show notes again about that kind of stuff, as well as a link to the Friday Night Writes list if you want to be a part of the writing prompt party that will be happening this Friday, because we are in the last week of February. So this Friday at 5:30 p.m. Eastern, we will have a writing prompt party via Zoom that will be recorded and then aired on the YouTube channel. And if you're not familiar with a writing prompt party, it's simply we get together on Zoom. I pick a writing prompt. I set a timer. We all write on the writing prompt, and then we read aloud our first draft fiction. And it is wonderful and terrifying and great, and a really, really great experience. And if you feel uncomfortable with the idea of your first draft being on YouTube, I could pause the recording when you read aloud so that you don't have to have that out there. And that's always an option for anybody that participates in the writing prompt party, because I don't want anyone to feel uncomfortable in any way. And also, since they are not streaming live, even if I don't press pause, if after you read it you decide I really don't want that up there, you can just tell me, and before I upload it to YouTube, I can edit that out. So there's really no reason not to come and join us. And if you miss it this month because perhaps you're just catching up on listening to episodes and it's already past February when you hear this, just know that in the fourth Friday of every single month, we are doing the same thing. So that link still applies. You just sign up for the Friday Night Writes newsletter, and you will get the link to participate in that month's I was going to say live writing prompt recorded. Well, it is live. It's live when we do it together on Zoom. So, yeah, that's it. Have a great week. Thank you, as always, for listening. And if you have not done so, please don't forget the power of the review. I would greatly appreciate it if you review the Stop Writing Alone podcast wherever you listen to it. Before you go, don't forget to subscribe to the Stop Writing Alone podcast wherever you're listening to this episode today. Then connect with us on Facebook at Stop Writing Alone Facebook page, or in the Stop Writing Alone with Nicole Rivera Facebook group. Check Instagram or Twitter, where I'm at NV_Rivera, to find links to our email newsletter. Recording, hosting, editing, producing. It's so much work. Disaster has struck. I finished my coffee. Tell me coffee is coming. ko-fi.com linktree.com/stopwritingalone.